Susan had survived 10 years of cruelty by learning to disappear. But on a winter afternoon in 1889, the Duke of Ashford walked into her prison and looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. No one understood why the most desired man in England would want a woman her own family treated like nothing. He offered her escape. She accepted without knowing the price. What began as refuge would become surrender. What started as protection would turn into love. Because some connections are too powerful to resist, and some desires too dangerous to deny. The morning light filtered through the grimy windows of Thornhill House as Susan knelt beside the drawing-room hearth, her hands raw from scrubbing. The ashes were still warm and she worked quickly, silently, the way she had learned to move through this house. Like a breath, like nothing at all. Behind her, voices drifted from the breakfast room. Her cousin Millicent's laugh cut through the air like broken glass, speaking of the Havisham ball, the lavender silk gown, the certainty that Lord Pemberton would ask her to dance. "Susan, bring more coal," her aunt had commanded earlier without looking up, "and do try not to track soot through the hall." She had not tracked soot, she never did, but the accusation hung in the air anyway, one more invisible bruise. Thornhill House had once been grand, but years of poor investments had stripped away its dignity. The furniture was old, the carpets worn thin. The silver had been sold piece by piece. Only the facade remained intact, a desperate performance of respectability. And Susan remained, useful, necessary, unwanted. "Susan," her aunt's voice called sharply, "come here at once." She smoothed her apron and entered the breakfast room. The family sat arranged like a portrait. Her uncle at the head, hidden behind his newspaper. Her aunt, rigid with false elegance. Millicent and Thomas, both fair-haired and pink-cheeked, both looking at Susan with amusement mixed with contempt. "The eggs are cold," her aunt said. "Must you make every meal an ordeal?" Susan had not prepared the breakfast, but contradicting would only make things worse. "I apologize. I will speak with cook." Her uncle lowered his newspaper suddenly. "There is a letter. Concerning you." The room fell silent. "A letter, sir?" Susan kept her expression neutral despite her racing heart. "From the Duke of Ashford. He requires assistance with household management. Your name was mentioned as a possible candidate. The Duke of Ashford." Everyone in the county knew him. A widower, father to 3 young children. The most sought-after gentleman in England. Wealthy, impeccably connected, possessed of a reputation for honor and discipline. And he wanted Susan? Millicent recovered first. "Susan? Surely there is some mistake. What would a duke want with her?" Thomas snorted into his tea. "Perhaps he requires someone for the scullery," her aunt said. "Someone accustomed to hard labor." The words landed precisely where intended. Susan felt shame rise in her chest, but she pushed it down where all the other humiliations lived. "What does the letter say exactly?" she asked, surprised by her own steadiness. "He will visit this afternoon to assess your suitability in person." Her aunt became suddenly animated. "Then we must prepare. Susan, clean the drawing room again, the entrance hall. Polish the banister. And for heaven's sake, do something about your appearance. You look like a washerwoman." Beneath the familiar anxiety, something dangerous stirred. Hope. The hours passed in frantic preparation. Susan scrubbed and polished until her hands bled. She arranged flowers, aired rooms. By 3 o'clock, Thornhill looked almost respectable. Susan changed into her only decent dress, dark blue once belonging to Millicent. She pinned her hair back and stared at herself in the small attic mirror. "This is your chance. Whatever this is, it is your chance." The sound of horses on gravel brought her to the window. Her breath caught. The Duke's carriage gleamed black, pulled by 4 matched horses. 2 footmen opened the door. And then he emerged, Charles Ashford, Duke of Ashford. Tall, dressed with understated elegance. But there was something else, a stillness, a gravity. His dark hair was touched with grey at the temples. His face was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and strong lines. But it was his eyes, grey, like winter skies, assessing everything. "Susan," her aunt's voice carried up the stairs, "come down at once." She descended slowly, heart hammering. In the entrance hall, her family had arranged themselves like actors. Her uncle bowed with obsequiousness that made Susan's stomach turn. "Your Grace, what an unexpected honor. Welcome to Thornhill House, thank you. I trust my letter explained the purpose of my visit. May I present my niece, Susan?" Susan stepped forward. Their eyes met, and the world tilted. He was staring at her with something that looked almost like recognition, as if he had seen her before, as if he had been looking for her. "Miss Susan, I am pleased to make your acquaintance." She curtsied, unable to speak. Up close, he was overwhelming. The intensity of his focus, he looked at her the way no one had ever looked at her before, as if she were real, as if she mattered. "I prefer to speak with Miss Susan alone," the Duke said firmly, briefly. Her aunt opened her mouth to protest, but his expression left no room for argument. Susan found herself ushered into the drawing room, the door closing softly. She stood acutely aware of how shabby everything must look. The threadbare rug, the faded curtains, the worn furniture. But the Duke was not looking at the room, he was looking at her. "Miss Susan, I imagine this visit has come as a surprise." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I will be direct. I have 3 children. My wife passed 3 years ago. I need someone to help manage the household, particularly concerning the children's daily routines. It is demanding work, but I offer fair compensation, comfortable lodgings, and a respectful environment." Why me? The question seemed to surprise him. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of something he was not ready to say. "Because I believe you would do well in such a position. Because I have reason to think you would appreciate the opportunity. And because I trust you will treat my children with kindness." The last part was said with such quiet intensity that tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them back. "I would treat them well. I would work hard. I would not disappoint you." The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I do not expect you to decide immediately. Consider the offer. I will return tomorrow for your answer." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Miss Susan, what they say about you, the things I have heard, I do not believe them." And then he was gone, leaving Susan standing alone, her heart pounding, her mind racing. He knew, somehow he knew what they had done to her, and he had come anyway. That night, Susan lay in her narrow attic bed and allowed herself to imagine something she had not dared to imagine in years. A different life. A place where she was not invisible. A house where her presence was wanted, and a man with grey eyes who looked at her as if she was someone worth saving. She did not know then that tomorrow she would say yes. She did not know that climbing into his carriage would change everything. She did not know that the Duke had been watching from a distance, waiting for the right moment. She only knew that for the first time in 10 years, she felt the dangerous flutter of hope. And in the darkness, she whispered a prayer. "Please, let this be real." The morning after the Duke's visit arrived with a clarity that felt almost cruel. Susan woke before dawn, her body trained to rise before anyone could accuse her of laziness. Today was different. Today she had a decision to make. She dressed in the dim light, hands trembling. The Duke would return for her answer. A man who had looked at her as if she mattered. In the kitchen, Mrs. Davies looked up from the stove. "You barely slept, did you, child?" "How could I?" "The Duke is a good man, Susan, fair, honorable. If he has offered you a position, it is more than you will ever have here." "But why me?" Perhaps because someone told him the truth about this house. The sound of carriage wheels made them both freeze. "He is early. Go. And Susan, whatever you decide, know that you deserve kindness." Susan hurried to the washroom, splashing water on her face, smoothing her hair. When she looked in the mirror, she saw something new in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also hope. "Susan," her uncle's voice boomed. "Come down immediately." She descended slowly. At the bottom, her family had arranged themselves once more. Tension filled the air. The Duke stood in the center of the hall. In the morning light, he seemed even more imposing. His dark coat was perfectly tailored, his posture commanding. Those grey eyes found hers immediately, and she saw relief flicker in them. "Miss Susan, good morning." Your Grace. She curtsied. Her uncle stepped forward, smile too wide. Your Grace, we have considered your generous offer. However, we feel it is our duty to ensure that the terms are appropriate for someone of our family's standing. Susan felt ice slide down her spine. Her uncle was going to negotiate. The Duke's jaw tightened. I stated my terms yesterday. They are fair and final. But you must understand, Susan has been under our care for many years. We have invested in her upbringing. It would not be unreasonable to expect some compensation. The silence was crushing. Susan felt shame burn through her chest. They were trying to sell her. Charles Ashford's eyes moved from her uncle to Susan. What she saw there made her knees weak. Anger. Cold, controlled anger. I see. His voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. Let me be very clear. I am offering Miss Susan a position with fair wages, respectable accommodations, and dignified treatment. I am not purchasing a servant. I am not negotiating for property. If Miss Susan chooses to accept, she will come because she wishes to, not because you have sold her. Her uncle's face flushed red. Your Grace, I did not mean... The Duke raised one hand. I would like to speak with Miss Susan. Alone. But Your Grace, her aunt interjected, voice shrill. Surely such privacy is not necessary. We are her family. No, you do not. The words hung like a slap. Millicent and Thomas stood frozen. Miss Susan, the Duke turned to her, expression softening. Will you walk with me in the garden? She nodded. He offered his arm and she took it. They walked out, leaving her family in shocked silence. The garden was overgrown, but in the morning light with frost clinging to dead leaves, it had a melancholy beauty. I apologize for what just occurred. You have nothing to apologize for. That was my uncle's doing. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Miss Susan, I need you to understand something. I did not come here on a whim. I knew about this house, about how you are treated. How? His grey eyes held hers. I was in the village 3 months ago. I saw you in the marketplace. You were carrying packages, far too many for one person, and when you stumbled, your cousin laughed. I watched you gather everything yourself with such quiet dignity. Susan felt tears prick her eyes. You saw that. I saw more than that. I made inquiries. I learned you are the orphaned daughter of your uncle's brother, used as unpaid labor for a decade. I learned you are treated with cruelty disguised as family duty. Why? Susan whispered. Why would any of that matter to you? His voice was rough with emotion. Because I have 3 children who lost their mother. Because I understand what it is to grieve, to feel lost. And when I saw you that day, I saw strength. I saw grace under circumstances that would have broken most people. I thought, if I could bring someone like that into my home, someone who knows what it is to endure and still remain kind, then perhaps my children would learn what real strength looks like. Susan could not stop the tears now. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Miss Susan, he said gently, I'm offering you a position because I need someone I can trust with my children, but I am also offering you a way out. You do not owe your family anything. The choice is yours alone. She looked up at him, this man who was essentially a stranger, yet who had shown her more kindness than her family had in 10 years. I accept. Her voice was stronger than she felt. I accept your offer, Your Grace. Something shifted in his expression. Relief. But also something that looked like wonder. Charles, he said quietly. When we are not in company, you may call me Charles. Her breath caught. The intimacy felt enormous. Charles, she repeated softly. He smiled, and it transformed his severe face into something almost beautiful. Good. We leave within the hour. Within the hour. So soon. I will not leave you here a moment longer than necessary. If you have belongings, fetch them now. I will deal with your family. She hurried to her attic room. 2 dresses, a worn shawl, a book her father had given her, a small locket with her mother's portrait. Everything she owned fit into one small bag. When she descended, the Duke stood with her uncle's face pale and tight with suppressed rage. Miss Susan, are you ready? Yes, Your Grace. He took her bag and passed it to his footman. As they walked toward the door, Susan looked back once. Her aunt stood rigid with fury. Millicent's face was twisted with jealousy. Thomas looked confused. But it was her uncle's expression she would remember, not anger, but something closer to shame. And then she was outside, breathing cold winter air that tasted like freedom. The Duke's carriage waited, gleaming and beautiful. Charles handed her inside with a gentleness that made her want to weep. The interior was warm, with soft cushions and a blanket. Charles climbed in beside her, and the door closed. Through the window, she watched Thornhill House grow smaller as they pulled away. "Are you well?" Charles asked quietly. She turned to him and smiled, a real smile. "I am more than well, I am free." His hand moved slowly, carefully, as if asking permission. When she did not pull away, his fingers closed gently over hers. "You are safe now. I give you my word. In my home you will be treated with respect and kindness. You will have your own space, your own choices, and you will never be made to feel small again." Susan looked at their joined hands, at the way his strength seemed to flow into her, steadying her. She did not know what the future held. She did not know if she could trust this feeling blooming in her chest. But as the carriage carried her away from her past and towards something new, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps life could be different. That, perhaps, she could be different. And that perhaps the man sitting beside her, holding her hand as if it were something precious, might be the beginning of a story she had never dared to dream. The journey to Ashford Manor took 3 hours, and with each mile, Susan felt the weight of her old life lifting. Charles sat across from her in the carriage, not beside her as he had been when they left Thornhill. The distance felt deliberate, respectful, as if he understood she needed space to breathe. He did not speak much during the journey, but his eyes kept returning to her, not with hunger or possession, but with something gentler, concern perhaps, or curiosity about what she was thinking. Susan watched the countryside change through the window. The bleak, neglected fields around Thornhill gave way to rolling hills, dense forests, and eventually manicured estates that spoke of wealth and care. When they finally turned onto a private drive lined with ancient oaks, her breath caught. Ashford Manor rose before them like something from a dream. It was not ostentatious, not built to intimidate. Instead, it possessed a quiet elegance, all honey-colored stone and tall windows that caught the afternoon light. Ivy climbed one side of the house, and smoke curled from several chimneys. It looked warm. It looked lived in. It looked like a home. "It is beautiful," Susan whispered. Charles smiled slightly. "It has been in my family for 6 generations. My wife loved it here." The mention of his late wife created a moment of silence. Susan did not know what to say. She was stepping into a life that had belonged to someone else first, into a space shaped by a woman she would never meet. The carriage stopped, and footmen appeared immediately. Charles descended first, then turned to help Susan down. His hand was steady and warm as she stepped onto the gravel drive. The front doors opened, and a woman emerged. She was perhaps 50, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, assessing eyes. Her dress was black and elegant, clearly that of someone in authority. "Mrs. Brennan," Charles said. "May I present Miss Susan? She will be joining our household to assist with the children and household management. Miss Susan, this is Mrs. Brennan, our housekeeper. She manages Ashford Manor with exceptional skill." Mrs. Brennan curtsied briefly, her eyes taking in every detail of Susan's appearance. "Miss Susan, welcome to Ashford Manor." "Thank you," Susan managed, suddenly aware of how shabby her dress must look, how provincial she must seem. "Mrs. Brennan will show you to your quarters," Charles said. "Rest this evening. Tomorrow I will introduce you to the children properly. For now they are with their governess completing afternoon lessons." He paused, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected warmth. "You are safe here, Susan. I meant what I said in the carriage. You will be treated with respect." Before she could respond, he turned and walked into the house, leaving her with Mrs. Brennan. The housekeeper's expression was unreadable. "Come along, Miss Susan. I will show you the house." They entered through the main hall, and Susan tried not to stare. Everything was elegant but not excessive. Polished wood floors, paintings that looked centuries old, furniture that spoke of quality rather than ostentation. Fresh flowers stood in vases, and sunlight streamed through high windows. "The house has 42 rooms," Mrs. Brennan said as they walked. "The Duke's private quarters are in the east wing. The children's rooms are in the west wing, along with the nursery and schoolroom. Your room will be on the second floor near the children, but with your own privacy." They climbed a curved staircase, and Susan's legs trembled slightly. She was exhausted, emotionally and physically, but she forced herself to focus. Mrs. Brennan opened a door and stepped aside. "This will be your room." Susan entered and stopped. The room was not large, but it was beautiful. A proper bed with a thick mattress and clean linens. A wardrobe. A writing desk by the window. Curtains that looked new. A small fireplace with wood already laid. And on the bed, someone had placed a vase with fresh roses. "It is lovely," Susan said, her voice catching. "The Duke was quite specific about your accommodations," Mrs. Brennan said, her tone softening slightly. "He wanted you to be comfortable. Dinner is served at 7, but for tonight, I will have a tray brought to your room. You look exhausted, if you do not mind me saying." "I am," Susan admitted. "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan." The housekeeper nodded. "The household runs on a schedule, Miss Susan. Breakfast at 8, luncheon at 1, dinner at 7. The Duke values punctuality and order. The children have their routines, which I will explain tomorrow. If you need anything, pull the bell cord and a maid will come." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Susan, I have served this family for 20 years. I watched the Duke marry, watched him become a father, and watched him grieve. He is a good man, but he carries much weight. Those children need someone who will care for them, not simply manage them. The Duke seems to believe you are that person." "I hope I can be," Susan said quietly. Mrs. Brennan's expression softened further. "Rest now. Tomorrow will be demanding." When the door closed, Susan stood alone in her new room. She moved to the window and looked out over the grounds. Gardens stretched toward a small lake in the distance. Trees swayed in the wind. Everything was peaceful, ordered, alive. She touched the roses on the bed, their petals soft beneath her fingers. At Thornhill, she had slept in a drafty attic with a thin blanket. Here she had a proper room, warm and clean and hers. The tears came suddenly, overwhelming her. She sank onto the bed and wept, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like pain. She was safe. She was away from the cruelty, the humiliation, the endless grey sameness of being invisible. And Charles had done this. He had seen her suffering and offered her a way out. A soft knock interrupted her tears. "Come in," she called, wiping her face quickly. A young maid entered carrying a tray. "Begging your pardon, miss, but Mrs. Brennan sent up your dinner, and she said to tell you there is hot water for a bath if you wish it." A bath. Susan had not had a proper bath in months. At Thornhill, she had been allowed only cold water and the smallest sliver of soap. "Yes," Susan said. "Yes, please, I would like that very much." The maid smiled. "I will prepare it for you, miss. My name is Jenny. If you need anything, you just ask." After dinner and the most glorious bath of her life, Susan dressed in her nightgown and sat by the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In the distance, she heard the sound of children's laughter, then a man's voice, gentle and amused. Charles with his children. She imagined what it would be like tomorrow, meeting them, learning their names, their personalities, becoming part of their lives. For the first time in years, Susan felt something that might have been excitement. She climbed into the soft bed, pulled the clean sheets up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Just as sleep began to claim her, she heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside her door. A long pause. Then so quietly she almost missed it, a voice. "You settled in well?" It was Charles. He had come to check on her, but he did not open the door. He simply asked, respecting her privacy even as he showed his concern. Susan's heart squeezed. "Yes," she called back softly. "Thank you. For everything." Another pause. "Sleep well, Susan." The footsteps moved away, fading into silence. Susan lay in the darkness, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart beat too fast. No one had ever asked if she was settled. No one had ever cared about her comfort. No one had ever said her name with such gentleness. At Thornhill, Silence had been heavy with judgment and cruelty. But here, in this house, silence felt different. It felt like peace. She drifted toward sleep, and for the first time in 10 years, she did not fear what tomorrow would bring. Tomorrow, she would meet the children. Tomorrow, she would begin learning the rhythms of this new life. Tomorrow, she would start becoming someone new, someone who belonged, someone who mattered. And in the hallway outside her door, Charles Ashford stood for a long moment, his hand still resting on the doorframe where he had stopped himself from knocking again. He had brought her here to help with his children, yes, but as he walked back to his own quarters, he had to admit the truth he had been avoiding. He had brought her here because he could not stop thinking about her, because the sight of her trying so hard to be small had broken something in him. Because when she had accepted his hand in the carriage, something had shifted in his carefully controlled world. He did not know what it meant yet. He only knew that having Susan in his home felt right in a way nothing had felt right since his wife died, and that terrified him more than he was willing to admit. Susan woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the distant sound of birdsong. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, warm and sweet. She was at Ashford Manor. She was safe. She dressed carefully in her better dress, the dark blue one, and pinned her hair back neatly. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman who looked less tired, less afraid. A woman who might belong somewhere. Downstairs, Mrs. Brennan was waiting. "Good morning, Miss Susan. The Duke has requested that you join him and the children for breakfast. He wishes to make the introductions." Susan's stomach fluttered with nerves as she followed the housekeeper through the halls to a bright morning room. Sunlight poured through tall windows, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. Charles stood when she entered, and 3 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her. "Miss Susan," Charles said warmly, "good morning. May I present my children?" He gestured to the oldest, a boy of perhaps 9 with his father's dark hair and serious grey eyes. "This is Edmund, my eldest." Edmund bowed stiffly. "Miss Susan." The middle child, a boy of 7 with softer features and uncertain eyes, was next. "This is Henry." "Hello, Miss Susan," Henry whispered, barely audible. "And this," Charles said, his voice softening as he placed a hand on the youngest child's shoulder, "is Charlotte. She is 5. Charlotte had curls the color of honey and bright blue eyes that studied Susan with open curiosity. "Are you going to stay with us?" "I am," Susan said gently, kneeling so she was at Charlotte's eye level. "If that is all right with you." Charlotte considered this seriously. "Will you read to us? Mama used to read to us every night." The room fell silent. Charles's expression tightened with old grief, and Edmund looked away quickly. Henry's eyes filled with tears. Susan felt her heart break for these children. "I would be honored to read to you," she said softly. "What is your favorite story?" "The Secret Garden," Charlotte said immediately, "but Edmund says it is too sad." "It is not too sad," Susan said. "It is about finding hope when everything seems lost. It is about gardens coming back to life." Charlotte's face brightened. "Will you read it tonight?" "If your father permits it, yes." Charles cleared his throat, and when Susan looked up at him, she saw something raw in his expression. "That would be most welcome, Miss Susan. Please, join us for breakfast." The meal was formal but not uncomfortable. Edmund asked polite questions about where Susan came from, carefully avoiding anything too personal. Henry said little but watched her with shy interest. Charlotte chattered happily about her dolls, her pony, and the robin's nest she had found in the garden. Charles presided over it all with quiet authority, but Susan noticed how he looked at his children, with such love, such fierce protectiveness. He had lost his wife, but he was determined not to lose them. After breakfast, Mrs. Brennan showed Susan the children's routines: lessons with the governess from 9 until noon, luncheon at 1, outdoor time if weather permitted, quiet reading or drawing in the afternoon, dinner at 6 for the children, 7 for the adults. "Your role," Mrs. Brennan explained, "is to ensure they are cared for beyond their lessons, to be present when they need comfort or guidance, to help them remember how to be children again." Susan understood. These children had been too serious, too quiet. They had learned to grieve, but forgotten how to play. That afternoon, she found Charlotte in the garden, sitting alone on a bench and staring at nothing. "May I sit with you?" Susan asked. Charlotte nodded. Susan sat, and for a while they simply existed in companionable silence. "Do you miss your mama?" Charlotte asked finally. Susan's throat tightened. "I do. She died when I was very young. Sometimes I can barely remember her face, but I remember how she made me feel. Safe. Loved. Papa says Mama is in heaven," Charlotte said. "But I do not understand why she had to go there. Why could she not stay here with us?" Susan chose her words carefully. "Sometimes people leave us before we are ready. It is not fair, and it hurts terribly. But the love they gave us does not leave. It stays inside us, making us stronger." Charlotte looked up at her with those bright blue eyes. "Do you think Mama would like you?" "I hope so," Susan said honestly. "I hope she would be glad that someone is here to care for you when she cannot." Charlotte slipped her small hand into Susan's. "I think she would like you. You have kind eyes." Something shifted in Susan's chest. "Thank you, Charlotte. That is one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me." Over the following days, Susan settled into the rhythms of Ashford Manor. She read to the children every evening, their small bodies curled against her as she brought stories to life. She walked with them in the gardens, pointing out birds and flowers. She played simple games that made them laugh. Edmund slowly warmed to her, his stiff formality giving way to shy smiles. Henry began to speak more, his whispered words growing stronger. Charlotte attached herself to Susan with the fierce devotion only a 5-year-old could possess, and Charles watched, always watching. Susan would feel his eyes on her during meals, during the rare moments when they passed in the hallways. He did not speak much, but his actions spoke volumes. One rainy afternoon, Susan found a tray of hot chocolate and biscuits outside her door, with a note in elegant handwriting. "For a cold day. C." When she mentioned to Mrs. Brennan that the latch on her window was loose, it was repaired by evening. One morning, she found a book on her desk. Poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Inside the cover, another note. "I thought you might enjoy this." He was caring for her in small, quiet ways, ways that did not demand acknowledgement or gratitude, ways that simply said, "I see you. I am thinking of you." It made her heart race in a way that felt dangerous. One evening, after the children were asleep, Susan stood in the hallway outside their rooms, listening to their peaceful breathing. She heard footsteps and turned to find Charles approaching. "They are settling well," he said quietly. "You have a gift with them. They are wonderful children. You should be very proud." "I am. But I have been too rigid with them since their mother died, too focused on maintaining order and structure. I forgot they needed softness too. You have given them stability, that matters." Charles moved closer, and Susan's breath caught. But stability is not enough. They needed someone who could show them it is safe to feel again, to laugh, to be vulnerable. His voice dropped lower. "You have given them that gift, Susan. In only a few days they are different, lighter, thank you." Susan looked up at him, and the air between them suddenly felt charged. "You do not need to thank me. Being here with them, it is a gift to me as well." His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was brief, barely there, but it sent heat flooding through her. "Susan," he said, her name rough in his throat. "Yes? I want you to know that you are not just an employee in this house. You are not just someone hired to perform duties. You are becoming part of our lives, part of our family." His eyes held hers with such intensity that she felt dizzy. "That means something to me. You mean something to me." Before she could respond, before she could even process what he was saying, he stepped back. "Good night, Susan. Sleep well." He walked away, leaving her trembling in the hallway. That night, Susan lay in her bed and pressed her fingers to the spot where he had touched her face. Such a small gesture, barely a touch at all, but it had felt like a promise. She did not know what was happening between them. She did not know if she should allow herself to hope for anything beyond this moment. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not just finding a home here. She was finding herself, the woman she had always been beneath the fear and shame. The woman who deserved kindness, who could offer love freely, who was strong enough to matter. And Charles was helping her discover that woman. one careful touch at a time. 3 weeks had passed since Susan arrived at Ashford Manor, and the house had begun to feel like home. The children laughed more freely now, their grief still present but no longer suffocating them. Edmund had shown her his collection of stones from the estate. Henry had asked her to teach him to draw. Charlotte followed her everywhere like a devoted shadow. And Charles was always there, watching with those grey eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. The change between them had been subtle but undeniable. Lingering glances across the dinner table, hands that almost touched when passing in hallways, conversations that lasted longer than necessary, filled with words that meant more than they said. Susan felt herself falling, and she did not know how to stop. Did not know if she wanted to. Late one evening she woke to the sound of crying. She rose quickly, pulling on her robe, and hurried down the hall toward the children's rooms. The sound came from Henry's room. She found him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking with sobs. Charlotte stood in the doorway, her own face frightened. "Henry, darling, what is wrong?" Susan sat on the edge of his bed and gathered him into her arms. "I had a bad dream," he gasped between sobs. "Mama was calling for me, but I could not reach her. She kept getting farther away." Susan held him close, rocking gently. "It was just a dream, sweetheart. Just a dream. You are safe. I am here. But what if I forget her?" Henry's voice broke. "What if I cannot remember her face?" "You will not forget," Susan promised. "Love like that does not disappear. It stays with you always." She heard footsteps and looked up to find Charles in the doorway, still dressed, his cravat loosened. His eyes took in the scene with immediate understanding. "Papa," Charlotte ran to him. "Henry had a bad dream about Mama." Charles entered the room and knelt beside the bed. His large hand rested on Henry's back. "Son, look at me." Henry turned his tear-stained face toward his father. "Your mother loved you more than anything in this world," Charles said, his voice thick with emotion. "That love does not leave just because she is gone. It is in every memory you have of her, in every lesson she taught you, in the way you care for your brother and sister. She is not truly gone as long as you carry her in your heart." Henry threw himself into his father's arms, and Charles held him tightly. Over Henry's head, his eyes met Susan's, and what she saw there made her chest ache. Gratitude, pain, and something else. Something that looked like need. Susan stood. "I will fetch some warm milk. That always helps with bad dreams." She returned 15 minutes later to find Charles still sitting on Henry's bed, Charlotte curled up beside them, all three talking quietly about their mother. Susan handed Henry the warm milk and watched him drink it slowly. "Better?" she asked softly. Henry nodded. "Thank you, Miss Susan." Charlotte yawned. "Will you stay until we fall asleep?" "Of course," Susan said. She settled into the chair by the window, while Charles sat on the edge of Henry's bed. They stayed in comfortable silence as the children drifted back to sleep, moonlight casting silver patterns across the floor. When both children were breathing deeply, Charles rose carefully and gestured toward the door. Susan followed him out into the hallway. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You handled that beautifully. They needed you more than they needed me. You gave them what they truly needed to hear. Perhaps, but you gave them comfort. You gave them safety." Charles's voice dropped lower. "You give this house something it has been missing for 3 years. What is that?" "Warmth. Life. Hope." They stood in the dim hallway, close enough that Susan could see the tiredness in his face, the weight he carried in those strong shoulders. "You should rest," she said gently. "You look exhausted. I cannot sleep most nights. Too many thoughts. Too much guilt." "Guilt?" Charles looked away. "About my wife. About how I failed her. How could you have failed her? You clearly loved her deeply. I was not here when she died," he said, his voice rough. "I was in London on business. She fell ill suddenly, and by the time I returned, she was gone. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell her one last time how much she meant to me." Susan's heart broke for him. "That was not your fault. You could not have known. But I should have been here." His jaw tightened. The children needed me and I was not here, just as they needed their mother and she left them. He knew his words were irrational, born of grief, but they poured out anyway. "Charles," Susan said firmly, "look at me." He did, and she saw the pain in those grey eyes. "You are a good father, a good man. You did not fail anyone. Life is cruel sometimes, and we lose people before we are ready. But you honor your wife's memory by caring for your children, by building a home filled with love. She would be proud of you. How do you know what she would feel? Because I see what you have created here. I see how your children adore you. I see how hard you work to give them stability and comfort. That is not failure. That is love." Charles stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a gentle, deliberate touch. "Susan, there is something I need to tell you. Something I should have said from the beginning." Her heart hammered. "What is it?" "When I first saw you in the village, when I watched how you were treated, I made inquiries. I learned everything. How your parents died. How your uncle took you in but treated you as a servant. How your family mocked you, belittled you, made you feel worthless." Susan tried to pull her hand away, shame flooding through her. But he held firm. "I know what they did to you," he continued. "The cruelty, the humiliation, the way they made you invisible. And I could not bear it." "Why?" she whispered. "Why would any of that matter to you?" His other hand came up to cup her face, and Susan's breath stopped. "Because when I saw you that day, I saw strength that took my breath away. I saw a woman who endured what would have broken most people, and yet you remained kind, gentle, good. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to bring you somewhere you would be valued. Somewhere you would be seen." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I told myself it was for the children, that I needed someone compassionate to help them heal, but that was only part of the truth. What is the rest? I wanted you here because I could not stop thinking about you, because the idea of you suffering in that house made me feel things I had not felt in years. Anger, protectiveness, and something else, something I was afraid to name." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "I do not understand. Do you not?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Susan, you matter to me, not as an employee, not as someone who helps with my children, as you, the woman who reads stories with such passion, who makes my children laugh, who looks at the world as if it still holds wonder despite everything it has done to hurt you." "I am nobody," she said, her voice breaking. "I have nothing. I am nothing." "You are everything," he said fiercely, "and I will spend however long it takes proving that to you." The air between them crackled with electricity. His hand still cupped her face, his eyes dark with emotion. Susan felt dizzy, overwhelmed, terrified. "Charles, I cannot." "You can," he said softly. "You can allow yourself to be cared for. You can allow yourself to believe you are worthy of kindness, of affection, of everything you have been denied." His face moved closer, his breath warm against her skin. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me this is unwanted, and I will never speak of it again." But Susan could not speak, could not move, could only stare into those grey eyes and feel her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "Charles," she whispered. It was not a rejection, it was a surrender. His lips brushed hers, soft and questioning. A first kiss that felt like a promise, like coming home. Susan's eyes closed and she leaned into him, her hands clutching his shirt as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. The kiss deepened, and she felt years of loneliness, of hurt, of believing she was unworthy, begin to crack and fall away. Charles kissed her as if she were precious, as if she mattered, as if she were enough. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered, "not just for the children, for me. Stay because you want to, because this, what is happening between us, is real." Susan's heart was so full it hurt. "I want to stay. I want this. But I am afraid." "Of what?" "That I will wake up and this will be gone. That I will be back in that attic room, invisible and worthless again." Charles pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You will never be invisible again. I see you, Susan, and I am not letting go. If you felt the beauty of this moment, the way two broken people are finding healing together, please subscribe to this channel. And tell me, what do you think will happen next? Will their love survive what's coming? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading your reactions to these stories. The weeks following their first kiss passed in a haze of stolen moments. Charles found reasons to seek Susan out. A question about the children, a book he thought she might enjoy, an observation about the gardens. Each encounter ended with touches that lingered. His hand on her lower back, her fingers brushing his. Glances that held entire conversations. One morning at breakfast, Charles set down his newspaper. There is an event this Saturday, a charity ball hosted by the Worthingtons. The entire county will attend. Edmund looked up. Will we go, Papa? Not this time, son. It is an evening affair for adults only. Charles's eyes moved to Susan. Miss Susan, I would like you to accompany me. Susan nearly dropped her fork. Me? But I have no suitable dress for such an event. That has been arranged, Mrs. Brennan will take you to the dressmaker this afternoon. Consider it part of your position. As someone integral to this household, your presence at social functions reflects on Ashford Manor. The dressmaker's shop was unlike anything Susan had ever experienced. Bolts of silk and satin in every color. The dressmaker immediately began pulling fabrics in deep jewel tones. The Duke specified emerald green. He said it would complement your coloring beautifully. Susan touched the silk with trembling fingers. I cannot possibly wear something so fine. Mrs. Brennan's expression softened. The Duke wants you to feel confident. Let him give you this. The finished dress arrived Friday evening. When Susan put it on, she barely recognized herself. The emerald silk hugged her figure before flowing gracefully to the floor. The neckline was modest but elegant. When she descended the stairs, Charles was waiting. He looked devastatingly handsome in his evening attire, but when he saw her, he stopped breathing. Susan, you look absolutely breathtaking. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. Thank you. It is not the dress. It is you. You are radiant. In the carriage, he took her hand immediately. There will be people there who knew your family. Some may be unkind. Susan's stomach tightened. Perhaps I should not go. No. His grip tightened. You will go. And anyone who dares to speak ill of you will answer to me. You are under my protection now, Susan. That means something. The Worthington estate blazed with light. Susan felt her courage falter. Charles leaned close. You belong here. You have more grace in your smallest gesture than they have in their entire beings. They entered together and heads turned immediately. The Duke of Ashford was always a figure of interest, but tonight he had a woman on his arm, a woman no one recognized. The whispers started almost instantly. Charles led her through the crowd with confidence. This is Miss Susan, an integral member of my household. She assists with my children and estate management. It was the perfect description. Respectable, professional. Yet the way he looked at her suggested something more. They were near the refreshment table when Susan heard a familiar, cruel laugh. Her blood turned to ice. Why, is that little Susan from Thornhill? Millicent's voice cut through the crowd. I barely recognized you in that dress. However did you afford it? Susan turned slowly to face her cousin. Millicent looked older, harder. Beside her stood Thomas and their mother. The dress was a gift, Susan said quietly. A gift? Millicent's laugh was sharp. From whom? Surely not from the Duke, unless you have found a way to make yourself useful in ways we never imagined. The implication was clear and vile. Several nearby guests gasped. Susan felt humiliation burn through her chest. Before she could respond, Charles stepped forward. His face was calm, but his eyes were glacial. I beg your pardon, but I must have misheard. Surely you did not just insult Miss Susan in such a manner. Millicent's smile faltered. Your Grace, I meant no offense. Your former relation, Charles said softly, dangerously, whom your family treated with unconscionable cruelty for 10 years. Your former relation, who worked without pay, without respect, without basic human dignity. The crowd had gone silent. Miss Susan is with me. She is part of my household. She cares for my children with devotion and skill. She has earned her place through kindness, intelligence, and strength of character. 3 qualities I notice are sorely lacking in others. Millicent's face turned red. Your Grace, you cannot possibly. I can and I do. Miss Susan will be treated with respect, in my home, in this county, everywhere. Anyone who fails to show her proper courtesy will find themselves unwelcome at Ashford Manor. It was a social death sentence. Susan's aunt stepped forward, desperation in her eyes. Your Grace, surely what you meant is clear. What you have done to Susan is clear, and I will not tolerate any repetition of such treatment. He turned to Susan, his expression softening immediately. Would you care to dance? Susan could barely breathe. I do not know how. Then I will teach you. Trust me. He led her to the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. The crowd parted. Charles placed one hand at her waist, took her hand in his and began to move. Follow my lead. Left, right, turn. You are doing beautifully. Susan stumbled slightly, but he caught her easily. Gradually she found the rhythm. The room began to blur until there was only Charles, his grey eyes holding hers. You defended me, she whispered. Always. I will always defend you. Why? His hand tightened on her waist. Because you matter to me. Because seeing you hurt makes me want to burn the world down. Because when I look at you, I see everything I thought I had lost. Hope, joy, the possibility of love again. Susan's breath caught. Charles, I know it is too soon. I know you may not feel the same. But I needed you to know. I needed everyone to know that you are under my protection, that you are important to me. The music swelled around them. I do feel the same. I think I have from the beginning. His eyes blazed with emotion. Then we will face whatever comes together. The dance ended, and the room erupted in polite applause. Charles escorted her back through the crowd, and this time people bowed respectfully. No more cruel whispers. The Duke had claimed her, and in this world, that changed everything. On the carriage ride home, Charles pulled her close and Susan rested her head against his shoulder. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For believing I was worth saving. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. You saved yourself, Susan. I simply gave you a place where you could flourish. As the carriage rolled through the dark countryside toward Ashford Manor, Susan realized something profound. She was not the invisible girl anymore. She was not the unwanted relation. She was the woman the Duke chose, the woman he defended, the woman he was falling in love with. And for the first time in her life, she believed she deserved it. The morning after the ball, Susan woke with a sense of unreality. Had Charles truly defended her in front of the entire county? Had he truly held her as they danced and spoken of love? She dressed and went downstairs, unsure of what to expect. Would things be different now? Would he regret his public declaration? But when she entered the breakfast room, Charles looked up with a smile that made her heart stumble. Good morning, Susan. Not Miss Susan, just Susan. As if the walls between them had finally come down. Good morning, she replied softly. The children chattered through breakfast, oblivious to the tension humming between the adults. After the meal, Charles caught her hand gently. Walk with me, please. They went to the garden, the same place where they had walked that first morning. But everything was different now. Charles stopped near the fountain and turned to face her. His expression was serious, almost nervous. There is something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning. But I was afraid. Susan's heart began to race. Afraid of what? He took a deep breath. I did not find you by accident, Susan. I did not simply hear about your situation and decide to help. The truth is more complicated than that. She waited, hardly breathing. 5 months ago, I came to the village on business. I was meeting with the local magistrate about some estate matters. On my way back to my carriage, I stopped at the churchyard. My wife is not buried there, but I sometimes find peace in quiet places. His eyes grew distant with memory. You were there, sitting on a bench near the old oak tree. You were mending something, a dress, I think, and you were crying. Very quietly, as if you were afraid someone would hear you. Susan remembered that day. She had torn her only good dress and known her aunt would be furious. She had gone to the churchyard to repair it in peace, and the loneliness had overwhelmed her. "I should have walked away," Charles continued, "but something about you stopped me. The way you wiped your tears so quickly, as if you had no right to them. The way your hands shook as you tried to sew. The way you looked so utterly alone." He stepped closer. "I asked the vicar about you. He told me you were the niece of the family at Thornhill, that you had been orphaned young and taken in by your uncle. But the way he said it, the sadness in his voice, made me ask more questions." Susan felt tears prick her eyes. "You investigated me." "I made discreet inquiries. I learned that you were treated as a servant in your own family's home, that you were mocked and belittled, that you had not left the estate in months because your family was ashamed to be seen with you, and I learned that you had nowhere else to go." His voice grew rough. "I could not stop thinking about you. I told myself it was simple compassion, that any decent person would want to help. But the truth is, from that moment in the churchyard, you were in my thoughts constantly." Susan's breath came in short gasps. "Why did you not just approach me then?" "Because I had no reason to. I could not simply walk up to a woman I did not know and offer her a position. It would have been inappropriate, suspicious. So I waited. I planned. I made sure that when I did approach it would seem natural, professional." He took her hands in his. "The opportunity came when I spoke with a business associate who knew your uncle. I arranged for my need for household assistance to reach your uncle's ears. I made sure your name was suggested, and then I came to Thornhill as if it were simply a matter of hiring help." Susan tried to process this. "You orchestrated everything?" "Yes." His grey eyes held hers with desperate honesty. "I am sorry for the deception, but I could not leave you there, Susan. I could not know you were suffering and do nothing." She pulled her hands away, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "So this was all planned? The job offer? Bringing me here, all of it?" "The job offer was real. My children did need someone. But yes, I could have hired anyone. I chose you specifically because I wanted to help you, because I could not bear the thought of you trapped in that house for one more day. And what we feel now?" She gestured between them. "This connection? Was that part of your plan too?" "No." His voice was fierce. "That was never part of any plan. I thought I would bring you here, give you safety and dignity, and that would be enough. I did not expect to feel this way. I did not expect to fall in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Love. He had said it clearly now. "You love me," Susan whispered. "I love you." He said it again, stronger. "I love your strength, your kindness, the way you care for my children as if they were your own, the way you look at the world with wonder despite everything it has done to hurt you. I love you, Susan, and I am terrified that learning the truth will make you hate me." Susan turned away, her mind spinning. Part of her felt manipulated, as if her choices had not been her own. But another part, a larger part, felt something else entirely: relief, gratitude, and love. She turned back to him. "I should be angry. I should feel used or deceived. You have every right to be angry, but I am not." Susan's voice grew stronger. "Because you gave me a choice when we met. You offered me a position, but you said I could refuse. You did not force me. You gave me an opportunity, and I chose to take it." She stepped closer to him. "Yes, you orchestrated the circumstances, but everything that happened after I arrived here was real. The way you treat me with respect, the way your children have welcomed me, the way we have grown to care for each other. That was not manipulation. That was genuine." Charles looked at her with desperate hope. "You truly believe that?" "I know that." She took his hands now. "Charles, do you understand what you did for me? You saw a woman in pain and you found a way to help her that preserved her dignity. You could have simply given me money or found me a position anywhere, but you brought me here. You gave me a home, a family, a chance to matter." Tears slid down her cheeks. "You gave me back my life. How could I be angry about that?" He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as if he would never let go. "I was so afraid you would feel betrayed. "I feel saved," she whispered against his chest. "I feel seen. I feel loved. You are loved." He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands. "I love you, Susan, completely, desperately. And if you will have me, I want to make this permanent. I want you to stay here, not as an employee, but as my wife." Susan's heart stopped. "Wife, I know it is fast, I know society will talk, but I do not care. I want to marry you. I want to give you my name, my protection, my life. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are mine and I am yours." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "Say yes, Susan. Please say yes." She looked into his grey eyes and saw her future. A future with this man who had seen her suffering and could not walk away. This man who had given her dignity and respect when no one else would. This man who loved her not despite her past, but because of the strength she had shown in surviving it. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Charles kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I will speak with the vicar today," Charles said. "We can be married within a month if you wish." Susan laughed through her tears. "A month? So soon? I have waited 5 months already." His smile was tender. "I do not want to wait any longer." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Susan felt as if she were floating. Everything had changed. Everything was about to change. That afternoon, Charles gathered his children in the drawing room. Susan sat beside him, her hand clasped firmly in his. "Children," Charles began, "I have something important to tell you. Miss Susan has agreed to become my wife. She will be your new mother." Charlotte squealed with delight and launched herself at Susan. Edmund smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Henry climbed into Susan's lap and buried his face against her shoulder. "Does this mean you will stay forever?" Charlotte asked. "Forever," Susan promised, looking at Charles. "I will stay forever." That night, as Susan prepared for bed, she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This was not the invisible girl from Thornhill. This was not the woman who believed she was worthless. This was a woman who had been seen, chosen, loved. And as she climbed into bed and closed her eyes, she thought about the churchyard 5 months ago, about Charles seeing her cry and deciding she mattered enough to save. He had orchestrated their meeting, yes, but what came after was pure truth, and that truth was love. The days following their engagement passed in a blur of preparations. Wedding arrangements, visits from the vicar, letters to distant relatives. But through it all, Susan felt the tension building between her and Charles. Every glance lasted too long. Every accidental touch sent heat flooding through her. Every good night at her bedroom door felt like an unfinished sentence. Charles was careful, respectful. He did not press for more than chaste kisses, but Susan could see the desire in his eyes, could feel the restraint costing him. And she wanted more too, wanted him in ways she barely understood, but felt deep in her bones. 3 weeks after their engagement, a storm rolled in. Thunder shook the windows and rain pounded against the manor. The children went to bed early, exhausted from a day of indoor activities. The household settled into quiet. Susan sat in her room, trying to read, but the words blurred on the page. Her mind kept returning to Charles, to the way he had looked at her that evening at dinner, to the way his hand had lingered on hers when they said goodnight. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Brennan or a maid. But it was Charles who entered, still dressed but with his coat removed and his cravat loosened. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. "I could not sleep," he said quietly, "and I saw your light still burning. I could not sleep either." They stared at each other across the room, the air thick with everything unspoken. "May I sit?" Charles gestured to the chair by the window. Susan nodded, her heart racing. He sat and she remained on the edge of her bed, suddenly aware of how intimate this was. Him in her room, her in her nightgown and robe. The door closed behind him. "The storm is fierce tonight," he said, but his eyes were not on the storm. They were on her. Yes. Another silence, heavy with tension. "Susan," Charles said finally, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He stood and moved closer, kneeling beside her bed so they were eye to eye. "I'm trying very hard to be honorable, to wait until we are married. But every day it becomes more difficult." His hand came up to touch her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Every time I see you, I want you more. Every time you smile at me, every time you touch my hand, I feel myself losing the battle to remain patient." Susan's breath quickened. "I feel the same way." His eyes darkened. "Do you?" "Yes." She placed her hand over his. "I do not want to wait anymore, Charles. I want to be yours." "Completely, are you certain? Because once we cross this line, there is no going back." "I am certain." She leaned forward until their faces were inches apart. "I have never been more certain of anything." He kissed her then, and it was different from their previous kisses. Deeper, hungrier, a kiss that held weeks of restrained desire. Susan's hands moved to his shirt, fumbling with the buttons. Charles caught her hands gently. Slowly he murmured against her lips, "We have time. Let me savor this. Let me savor you." He stood and removed his waistcoat, then his shirt, revealing the muscled chest beneath. Susan's eyes widened. She had never seen a man without his shirt before. "You are beautiful," she whispered. Charles smiled. "That is my line." He sat beside her on the bed and carefully untied her robe, pushing it from her shoulders. His fingers traced the neckline of her nightgown, and Susan shivered at his touch. "Are you cold?" "No. I am nervous. But I want this. I want you." "There is nothing to be nervous about." His voice was gentle. "We will go slowly. If anything feels wrong, you tell me. And we stop. Your comfort matters more than anything else." He kissed her again, his hands moving through her hair, pulling out the pins until it fell around her shoulders in dark waves. "You have no idea how long I have wanted to see your hair down," he murmured. His lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, to her neck. Susan gasped at the sensation, her hands clutching his shoulders. Charles laid her back gently against the pillows, his body hovering over hers but not pressing down. "Tell me you want this," he said. "I need to hear you say it again. I want this. I want you. Please, Charles." He kissed her deeply, and Susan felt herself melting into the bed. His hands moved over her with reverence as if she were something precious. He touched her through the thin fabric of her nightgown, and she arched into his touch. "May I?" he asked, his fingers at the hem of her gown. "Yes." He removed the garment slowly, his eyes drinking in every inch of her. "You are perfect. Absolutely perfect." Susan felt vulnerable under his gaze, but also powerful. This man, this duke, who could have anyone, wanted her, chose her. Charles removed the last of his clothing, and Susan's breath caught. He was beautiful, strong, and the way he looked at her made her feel like the most desirable woman in the world. He positioned himself above her, his weight supported on his forearms. "This may hurt at first, but I promise I will be gentle, I trust you." He kissed her as he joined their bodies, and Susan gasped at the sensation. There was discomfort, yes, but also something deeper, a sense of completion, of becoming whole. Charles moved slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of pain. "Are you all right?" "Yes." She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him closer. "Do not stop." They moved together, finding a rhythm that felt natural and right. Susan had never imagined that this act could be so intimate, so connected. It was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, a joining of two people who had been broken separately and were now healing together. Charles whispered her name like a prayer. Susan responded with gasps and sighs that she could not control. The pleasure built and built until she thought she might shatter from it. When release came, it washed over them both. Charles buried his face in her neck, his body shuddering. Susan held him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Charles asked, immediately seeing her tears. "No." She laughed through the tears. "No, you did not hurt me. I am crying because I am happy, because I have never felt so loved." He rolled to his side and pulled her against him, wrapping the blankets around them both. His hand stroked her hair as she nestled into his chest. "I love you," he said softly. "So much that it terrifies me. I love you too." They lay in the darkness, listening to the storm outside and their own breathing. Susan traced patterns on Charles's chest with her fingers. "I always thought that if anyone ever wanted me like this, it would be because they pitied me or were using me," she whispered. "I never imagined someone could want me because they truly loved me." Charles caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You are not someone to be pitied, Susan. You are someone to be treasured." He shifted so he could look into her eyes. "You gave me back my life too, you know. After my wife died, I was just existing, going through the motions for the children but feeling nothing inside. And then I saw you, and something woke up, something I thought was dead forever. What was it? Hope. The belief that I could feel again, that I could love again, that life could be more than just duty and responsibility." Susan kissed him softly. "We saved each other." "Yes." He smiled against her lips. "We did." They made love again, slower this time, exploring each other with tenderness and curiosity, and when they finally drifted towards sleep, tangled together in the aftermath, Susan felt a peace she had never known. She was no longer invisible, no longer unwanted, no longer alone. She was loved, desired, chosen, and in Charles's arms, she was finally, completely home. The morning after changed everything. Susan woke wrapped in Charles's arms, sunlight streaming through the window, and for a moment she felt nothing but perfect contentment. Then reality crashed in. Charles stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her, he smiled with such tenderness that her heart ached. "Good morning, my love, good morning." He kissed her forehead, then her lips. No regrets. None. She meant it. Last night had been beautiful, sacred even. But as Charles dressed and prepared to return to his own quarters before the household woke, Susan felt the first flutter of anxiety. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Charles said, buttoning his waistcoat, "we prepare for our wedding, which I would like to move up if you agree. 2 weeks instead of 4. 2 weeks? I see no reason to wait longer." His eyes held hers. "Do you?" "No. No reason at all." He kissed her once more and slipped out of her room. Susan dressed quickly, her body feeling different, awakened. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman transformed by love. But the transformation would not go unnoticed. Over the next few days, Susan felt the household's awareness shift. The maids giggled and whispered. Mrs. Brennan watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing. The children seemed oblivious. But Edmund looked at his father and Susan with a curious expression, as if trying to understand what had changed. The announcement of the wedding date spread through the county like wildfire. 2 weeks. The Duke was marrying his household assistant in 2 weeks. The gossip began almost immediately. One afternoon, Susan was in the garden with Charlotte when Mrs. Brennan came to find her. "Miss Susan, you have a visitor, a Mrs. Adelaide Pemberton." Susan's stomach dropped. Mrs. Pemberton was one of the most influential women in the county, known for her sharp tongue and unforgiving judgment. In the drawing room, Mrs. Pemberton sat with perfect posture, her face arranged in an expression of false concern. "Miss Susan, how kind of you to see me." "Mrs. Pemberton." Susan sat across from her, hands folded in her lap. "How may I help you?" "I come as a friend, dear." The older woman's smile was cold. "I feel it is my duty to speak plainly with you about this hasty engagement." "I see. My dear girl, you must understand how this appears. You arrive at the Duke's home with nothing. Within weeks he is announcing his intention to marry you. People are talking. Let them talk." Mrs. Pemberton's eyes narrowed. "You are very bold for someone in your position. Do you truly believe the Duke loves you? Or is it possible that you have simply made yourself available in ways that a grieving man found convenient?" The words were like a slap. Susan felt her face flush with shame and anger. "I would ask you to leave," she said quietly. "I am trying to help you," Mrs. Pemberton continued. "Before you embarrass yourself further, Before you trap the Duke in a marriage he will come to regret. You are not his equal, child. You never will be. And eventually, he will realize that. That is enough. Charles's voice came from the doorway, cold and commanding. Mrs. Pemberton, you will leave my home immediately. The older woman stood, her face pale. Your Grace, I meant no offense. You came into my home and insulted the woman I love, the woman who will be my wife. You will not be welcome here again. After Mrs. Pemberton left, Charles found Susan still sitting in the drawing room, her hands trembling. She is wrong, he said, kneeling before her. Everything she said is wrong. Is it? Susan's voice broke. Charles, what if she is right? What if you are making a mistake? What if I am not enough? Stop. He took her face in his hands. You are everything. You are more than enough. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few days, more visitors came. Some were kind, offering genuine congratulations, but others came with barely veiled criticism, questions about Susan's background, comments about the speed of the engagement, insinuations about her motives. Each comment chipped away at Susan's newfound confidence. She began to remember what it felt like to be small, to be worthless, to be invisible. One evening she found herself standing in front of the mirror in her room, staring at her reflection with growing despair. What am I doing? She whispered to herself. I am nobody. I have nothing to offer him except problems and scandal. A knock at the door startled her. Come in. Edmund entered, looking uncertain. Miss Susan, may I speak with you? Of course, Edmund. She sat on the bed and patted the space beside her. What is troubling you? The boy sat, his young face serious. Are you going to leave us? Susan's heart broke. What? No, Edmund, why would you think that? I heard the servants talking. They said people in the county think you are not good enough for Papa. They said you might change your mind about marrying him. Susan pulled the boy close. Edmund, listen to me. I love your father very much, and I love you and Henry and Charlotte. I am not going to leave. But what if they are right? Edmund looked up at her with worried eyes. What if you are not happy here? What if we are not enough to make you stay? Susan realized with a jolt that the boy was expressing his own fears. He had lost his mother. Now he was terrified of losing Susan too. You are more than enough. She kissed the top of his head. All of you. You have given me the only real family I have ever known. Nothing anyone says will take that away. After Edmund left, Susan sat alone in the darkness. She thought about Mrs. Pemberton's words, about the whispers and gossip, about how easy it would be to believe she was not worthy. But then she thought about Charles's hands on her face, about the way he looked at her as if she were the son, about his children who had accepted her with open hearts, about the life she was building here moment by moment. She thought about the girl in the churchyard 5 months ago, crying alone because she believed no one cared, and she thought about the woman she was now, loved and wanted and chosen. The doubts did not disappear completely, but they quieted. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Charles standing there, his expression worried. Edmund told me about your conversation. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Susan, talk to me. What is wrong? Everything she had been holding back came pouring out. The visits, the comments, the growing certainty that she was ruining his life. Charles listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice steady and sure. Susan, look at me. She did. I knew when I decided to marry you that there would be talk. I knew society would judge. I knew it would be difficult. And I chose you anyway. But your reputation, my reputation, is mine to manage. And I would rather have a life filled with love and meaning with you than a life of empty respectability without you. He pulled her close. You are not ruining my life. You are making it worth living again. Susan buried her face in his chest. I am trying to be strong, but sometimes the old fears come back. I know. His hand stroked her hair. And when they do, you tell me. You lean on me. That is what marriage is, Susan. Supporting each other through the doubts and the fears. He tilted her face up to his. In 2 weeks, you will be my wife, my Duchess, and anyone who does not show you proper respect will answer to me. I will protect you, Susan. Always." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they pulled apart, she felt steadier. "I am not going to let them make me small again," she said. "I am not going to let their words steal what we have." "Good." He smiled. "Because I refuse to lose you now that I have finally found you." That night, as Susan lay alone in her bed, she made a decision. She would not hide. She would not apologize for being loved. She would not let the world convince her she was unworthy. She had fought too hard to get here, and she was not going back, not for anyone. The morning of the wedding arrived with clear skies and golden sunlight. Susan woke early, her heart racing with anticipation and joy. In a few hours, she would become the Duchess of Ashford. She would have a name that meant something, a place that was truly hers. But more than that, she would have love. Mrs. Brennan arrived with a team of maids to help her dress. The wedding gown was ivory silk with delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline, simple but elegant. When Susan saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. "You look like you belong in a painting," Mrs. Brennan said softly. "The Duke is a fortunate man. I am the fortunate one." The ceremony would take place in the small chapel on the estate grounds, intimate, personal, exactly what they both wanted. When Susan descended the stairs, she found Edmund, Henry, and Charlotte waiting for her. Edmund wore a new suit and looked so grown up it made her heart ache. Henry clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked himself. Charlotte wore a dress of pale pink and bounced with excitement. "You look like a princess," Charlotte breathed. "You look beautiful, Miss Susan," Edmund said formally. "Papa will be very happy." The walk to the chapel felt surreal. The path was lined with white roses, and a small group of guests had gathered. The vicar, Mrs. Brennan, and the household staff. A few close friends Charles trusted, and notably absent were the people who had hurt Susan. They had not been invited. When Susan entered the chapel, her eyes went immediately to Charles. He stood at the altar in formal attire, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him, but it was the expression on his face that stole her breath. Pure love, pure joy, pure certainty. She walked down the aisle alone, her head held high. She had no father to give her away, no family to support her, but she did not need them. She was walking toward her future on her own terms. Charles took her hand when she reached him, his grip warm and steady. "You are breathtaking," he whispered. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. The vicar spoke of love and commitment, of building a life together through joy and sorrow. When it came time for vows, Charles spoke first. "Susan, I promise to honor you every day of my life, to see you when others look away, to value your strength and your kindness, to stand beside you through whatever comes. You have given me back my life, and I give you mine in return, completely, forever." Susan's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows. "Charles, I promise to love you with everything I am, to be a mother to your children and a partner in your life. To never forget that you saw me when I was invisible and believed I was worth saving. You gave me a home, but more than that, you gave me myself. And I give that self to you, now and always." The vicar pronounced them husband and wife, and Charles kissed her with such tender passion that the small congregation burst into applause. They emerged from the chapel as the Duke and Duchess of Ashford. The children threw flower petals, and the staff cheered. As they walked back to the manor hand in hand, Susan felt a completeness she had never known. The wedding breakfast was joyful and intimate. Laughter filled the dining room. The children told stories and made everyone laugh. Charles never let go of Susan's hand except to eat. At one point, Edmund raised his glass in a toast to our new mother. "Thank you for choosing us." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for letting me be part of your family." After the meal, Charles led Susan to the library. "I have something for you." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a key. "What is this?" Charles fastened it around her neck. "It is the key to every door in this house. You are not a guest here, Susan. You are not an employee. This is your home. These doors are yours to open. This life is yours to live." She touched the pendant, overwhelmed. "Thank you." He pulled her close. No. Thank you. For saying yes, for believing in us, for being brave enough to accept love when the world told you that you did not deserve it. That evening, after the guests had departed and the children were in bed, Charles and Susan stood on the terrace overlooking the grounds. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Are you happy?" Charles asked. Susan turned to him, her hand resting over her heart, where his ring now sat on her finger. "I am more than happy. I am home." He kissed her forehead. "We both are." They stood together in the fading light, two people who had been broken finding wholeness in each other. 6 months later, the house was alive with change. Susan had transformed from the uncertain woman who arrived with one small bag into a confident duchess who managed the estate with grace and intelligence. The children flourished under her care, their grief softening into memories they could cherish without pain. Edmund had begun to smile more often. Henry had found his voice and spoke with confidence. Charlotte called Susan Mama now, and it felt as natural as breathing. Charles watched his wife move through their home with wonder. She had taken this place that felt like a tomb and made it live again, not by erasing the past, but by honoring it while building something new. One evening, Susan found Charles in his study, staring at a portrait of his first wife. "Do you still miss her?" Susan asked gently. "Always." He pulled Susan into his arms. "But I have learned that the heart is large enough to hold both grief and joy. I can honor her memory while loving you completely. They are not opposites. They coexist." Susan understood. She too carried her past, the years of pain and invisibility. But they no longer defined her. They were simply part of the journey that led her here. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Charles whispered, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For teaching me that life does not end with loss. That love can happen more than once. That choosing to be happy again is not a betrayal of the past, but an honoring of it." Susan kissed him softly. "You taught me that I was never worthless. That being small was something done to me, not something I was. You taught me that I deserve to take up space in the world." "We saved each other," Charles said. "Yes." She smiled in the darkness. "We did. Some people spend their entire lives searching for the place where they belong. Susan found hers not in a location, but in a choice. The choice to believe she was worthy of love. The choice to accept kindness when it was offered. The choice to fight for her own happiness instead of accepting the pain others inflicted. She learned that being saved is not about someone rescuing you from your circumstances. It is about someone showing you that you have the strength to save yourself. Charles gave her the opportunity. But Susan did the work of healing, of growing, of becoming the woman she was always meant to be. And in the end, she did not just find a home, she became one. For Charles, who needed to remember how to love. For the children, who needed to remember how to trust. For herself, who needed to remember that she mattered. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen quietly, not with grand gestures, but with small moments of courage. A woman accepting a hand offered in kindness. A man choosing to see beyond what society deems valuable. Two broken people deciding that together they could be whole. What part of Susan's journey touched your heart the most? Was it her courage to leave? Her strength to believe she deserved love? Or the moment she finally allowed herself to be seen? If this story moved you, please leave a like to support this channel. Subscribe so you never miss another story of love, resilience, and second chances. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? I love knowing that these stories reach people all around the world, each of you carrying your own journey toward the place you belong. Thank you for listening. May you always remember that you are worthy of the love you seek.